All right, happy Friday, everyone. My name is Caroline Player, and on behalf of the Georgia Tech Alumni Association, I welcome you to this segment of our Career Conversations webinars. Before we get started, let me tell you a little bit about our leader. Hallie Crawford is a certified career coach, speaker, and author from Atlanta, whose coaching company, HallieCrawford.com, helps people identify their ideal career path, navigate their career transition, and nurture their careers. Her team of coaches works with people of all ages. They have clients worldwide, and they've helped thousands of people achieve their career goals. Hallie's passionate about helping others because she took the same journey to find her own satisfying career and purpose in life. She knows firsthand the challenges that arise during career transition and has practical solutions to make the process successful. She's been coaching since 2002, has an undergrad and grad degree from Vanderbilt and the University of Illinois at Chicago. She has served on the board of the Georgia Coach Association and is regularly featured as a career expert in media, including CNN, Fox Business News, Wall Street Journal, and U.S. News and World Report. When she's not helping clients one-on-one, Hallie coaches small groups through virtual teleclasses and regularly holds speaking engagements and career workshops. She lives in Atlanta with her son, Vaughn, and when she is not working, she loves horseback riding, traveling, and living by the motto, the greatest risk in life is not taking one. Before I turn this presentation over to Hallie, just wanted to mention to you all, if you could check and make sure that you're on mute during the course of this conversation, that would be fantastic, just to avoid any background noise. If you would, submit any questions or comments that you have via the chat function window. You'll see that chat icon in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. Just pull that down and chat to Hallie or myself. That would be great. I would want to mention to you all, we are doing a special series with Hallie starting on July 15th. We have that registration up on our calendar page at gtalumni.org. She will be doing a 4-session career intensive, defining your ideal career. Would love for you all, anybody who's interested, to take a look at that as well. So Hallie, without further delay, let me turn over to you.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks everybody for being here. I'm very excited about this topic. It's near and dear to my heart because actually when I first started coaching or decided I wanted to be a career coach, it was actually about helping people be more authentic in their lives, but also their careers. So authenticity in the workplace is a really big deal for me, and I'm so glad you all are here today. Thanks for taking your lunch hour, or a little bit under that, to be with us today. So I just want you to know that I totally understand about not feeling or being able to be authentic in the workplace. I really struggled with this. In the last full-time job that I had before I became a coach, it was interesting. I had 2 different bosses at the time, and there was one that I could, because they kind of split my roles, and there was one that I could really be myself with, and there was one that I couldn't. The one that I could feel like I was myself and be authentic, her group and her department was like a family. They hung out sometimes after work. She was easygoing, and everyone was really happy, but still very productive. And the other boss that I couldn't be as authentic with, much less so. We all were much more, it was so interesting, much more tense and stressed. We feared her in a way, and I was in my 20s, this was a long time ago, and she was honestly, though, a very intimidating person. And it was a tough time for me because I felt like I really couldn't be authentic in this one area, but I could in the other. And it was interesting because the boss that I couldn't be as real with, so to speak, she said she wanted authenticity, but interestingly, she did not create the environment for it. So fortunately, I figured out, okay, I wanted to be a coach. I started my business, and I love this quote, "Be yourself, everyone else," is taken from Oscar Wilde. I feel like I see this, Caroline, and people, you know, in their signature line of their email a lot, and I think there's a commercial right now that has this on it too. But luckily for me, today it's very different. My career purpose statement actually includes in it, everyone, helping people be more authentic in their lives and career. That's why I started my business. And I feel that when, and this is part of what we're going to be talking about today, when I'm working with my clients, although the sessions are always about them and their agenda, of course, I find that being more authentic and sharing some personal things about me at the right time and the appropriate things to share, it actually helps develop rapport with my clients when I do that. So sometimes I share some of my weaknesses, a personal struggle I might be having. I don't always have to go into detail about my life, and usually it's a quick share about it if it's relevant and would serve a purpose and help a client. And in some cases, everyone, I don't share at all. It really depends on the person too. And so I'm floating this out there for you right now because these are all of the factors that we're going to be talking about today when you consider, okay, how do I be authentic at work and how much? How much so? What's appropriate and what's right? And I just want you to know that these are the kinds of things that I think about as well and use regularly with my clients. It's critical to find the right balance about what to share and when, and think about it in advance. It depends on your position, the relationships you have or want to establish at work, and why do you want to share in the first place? And this is all stuff we're going to talk about today. So first of all, we'll talk about authenticity for a second, why it's important. We're going to talk about 3 basic steps to help you begin to, think about, okay, what would I want to share in the first place? And that's step number 1, being more self-aware with who are we and what would we want to share. Number 2 is how to communicate those kinds of things clearly, because this is a critical piece to it. And number 3, what would be the purpose of me self-disclosing and what, making sure that it's appropriate as well. And then we're going to talk about making it real, come up with an action step at the end, because I always want people to, the rubber meets the road, you need to take an action step at least in the next week. And Caroline already mentioned our program starting July 15th for those needing help identifying their career path and that dream job. So, okay, so I had to use this little rubber ducky image. I thought this was so cute. So let's talk about why this is important, why authenticity is important. And when you look up the word authentic in the dictionary, basically it's not false or copied. It's something that's genuine or real. And I really liked, Caroline, this quote here pulled from a recent Harvard Business Review article. I definitely recommend you all checking this out. And by the way, you will get a PDF of this presentation today and the recording as well, so you'll be able to use these links. Right, Caroline?
That's right, yes.
Okay, cool. So this is a basic definition. We all know what authenticity is. So why is it important? And Caroline, feel free to dive in here after we talk about this. So why I believe and feel that authenticity is important at work is, and even in our personal lives, is because it helps build relationships with others. It is critical if you use it in the right way to effective leadership, and that's what this article is about. And I love what they said here, the gold standard for leadership, but you need to think about it. You can't have a simple, basic definition of it for yourself. You really have to think in advance about what this means for you and how to use it in the workplace. And the other reason why it's so important, and this goes back to, why I started my company and what we help people do, is we really do. I think we all need to feel like ourselves at work and feel like we can be who we are to a certain extent. It is not good to have a false sense of self in our personal lives or professionally, or else there's going to be a rub in our values, which we'll talk about today. And I believe it causes a lot of stress for us. So we want to be able to, be ourselves at work, or else it will cause that stress. And also, as part of this, be able to use the skills that we want to use. Because those, when we're using our natural talents and abilities, we feel more like ourselves as well, okay? And that also leads to greater fulfillment in the workplace. Caroline, any thoughts on this?
I think that sounds exactly right on. Having that ease of being yourself and in the workplace and relating to others, I think that one of the main creators of a trusting relationship is knowing more about the person that you're entering into that relationship with, professionally, personally, whatever it is, and having the details about that person's background and likes and dislikes is so important towards that.
Yeah. And it creates a stronger bond. I remember attending a workshop years ago about networking, and it's a great point the woman brought up about when you network, like come up with personal things that you want to share, even if it's just, oh, I saw this recent movie, or there was an art exhibit at the museum or something like that. Because what she said, I truly believe, is that people connect more with, and in a deeper way, with the personal stuff versus just the business stuff. I think the business stuff can be more superficial. And I think the same thing goes, for this too, what we're talking about today, okay? All right, so if we're looking at kind of like the big picture here, this is what I want you all to get and take away from what we're talking about today. These are 3 keys to professional authenticity, okay? Not being the plastic duck on the left, but the one on the right, okay? So first of all, it's understanding who you are, that authentic self. And as part of that, the second one is what do you want to share at work, okay? Because there are certain things that we don't want to share at work and it doesn't make sense to or it's not appropriate. So we do need to think about that, but you need to and everyone needs to think about, okay, to really feel like myself at work, what would I want to be able to share that would still be appropriate and all of that? And we need to know what where that line is for us in order to be able to be ourselves in the right way at work. And then we think about the third key, what is appropriate to share in order to feel more fulfilled but also more effective. So we have to balance these 3 things in order to consider what authenticity means for us at work, okay? And there's this little thing that we've got going on, and I'm sure you've encountered people that have done this before with you or seen it in action, this sharing versus oversharing. So this is a great quote from this article. There's a link down at the bottom, Psychology Today. And we all know that there's a difference between just simple sharing and sharing too much. And research on self-disclosure tells us, as we all know, that we do tend to like people more when we share with them a little bit of personal information, okay? But we also have to be careful that the things that we share in the self-disclosure is socially appropriate, because if we do it too much and it's not appropriate, it can make people uncomfortable, okay? So again, one of the questions, if you look down here at the bottom of the slide, is what do we want to share, when, and how often? These are the kinds of things we need to consider and think about when we're doing this at the workplace. Caroline, have you ever had any examples? I was trying to think of some with clients, and I did have one person who, you know, he shared to his boss actually that he was really unhappy at work, and he subsequently got fired, unfortunately. It was one of those things that he was younger and made a mistake.
Right, and I have had that very similar situation. Heard about a contract renewal and some negative things that were shared in approaching that. And yes, as a result of sharing a degree of unhappiness in that time frame, that same situation, that the contract was not renewed.
Yeah, so we do want to be careful with who we're sharing with. And
right.
When is it the right time, and when is it the right time for us, and the purpose of doing so, all of which we'll talk about, okay? All right, so here's my Zen self-awareness image here. So first of all, we need to know, and I'm not sure everybody knows this, which is part of why we talk about this at the very beginning. It's like, if you're not fulfilled at work, and let's say you don't feel like yourself, where is the rub? You know, what is it that you want to be sharing? You need to know yourself first and be, you know, self-aware. So to be authentic, first of all, we need to know who we are. We need to identify and understand what our values are and what makes us happy, the skills that we want to use regularly, and the brand we want to portray. So having a career that honors your values leads to a sense of fulfillment and a sense of authenticity. And we're looking at the internal piece here first, your values and your strengths. And being able to express your values at work is the same thing, okay? So being able to honor those values in some way. And by the way, everyone, there is a difference, I feel, with our clients. This is what we do, is we help them identify the difference between their personal values, those values they want to have honored in their personal life, versus their career values. So keep in mind there are some values that you do just want to keep in your personal life, and it's probably more appropriate to do so too. So you want to know the difference and identify those. And then also using your strengths regularly will lead to a sense of being yourself and authenticity as well, okay? So there's an internal piece here, some self-reflection that you need to do in order to define this piece, okay? And we'll talk about the external piece in just a second. So how do we define what our values are, though? Some of you might be thinking that. So one way to do this is to write down times in your life or at work when you felt full, fulfilled, or rewarded, or that was incredibly exciting for you. And think about and write down, what were you doing? and focus everyone on not just what you were doing, like were you traveling to Europe and it was challenging, but it was also fun to make the plan or whatever it was, but think specifically, everybody, about what was cool about it for you. Because if you ask yourself that question, those things could be clues to values, okay? So that is one way to identify values. Carolyn, do you have any other thoughts on that?
Right. I think that covers it, Hallie. Yeah, absolutely. Think about those things where you've really enjoyed, related well, worked well with you.
Yeah, and then what was great about it for you, and write them down. It really helps everyone to see them in black and white in writing, helps you evaluate those are. So those are possible clues to values. And then in terms of your strengths, one way that we like helping people identify their strengths is the StrengthsFinder assessment, strengthsfinder.com. We just love that. It's low cost, gives you a lot of information for that low cost. And also, you can interview 3 friends or family members and ask them, what do they see that I do really well? Or when they think of you, what's the first word that comes to mind? I love doing that kind of stuff. And that can help you identify not just what your strengths are, but also how you come across and possibly some of your values as well, okay? So let's talk about the external piece. So we also, in this self-awareness step here at the beginning, everyone, we want to understand, okay, what's the brand, so to speak, that we're portraying? What's the image we're portraying at work? And is it the one that we want to? Is it consistent with who we want to be and what we want to portray? So I believe that your brand is a combination of your values, your strengths, and your personality type, okay? And a great exercise to start working on this piece of it, is to take an informal survey of like 3 colleagues, even your boss, to identify the image you're portraying at work and ensure it's the right one. Again, ask them, what do you think of when you think of me? How do I come across at work? What do you see as my greatest strength? And then compare what they say to you with what you want them to say. And is there a disconnect you want to address? If there's a gap there, then you may not be portraying the right thing and not be being as authentic as you want to be. Does that make sense, Caroline?
It totally does, and I love the idea of sort of having a conversation with your contacts, people who know you well. On the webinar that I participated in just last night, Hallie, one of Hallie's team members, talked about the our lack of recognition for our own brand and what we're portraying and our own strengths. And I really think it's such a great idea generator to talk with others so they can tell you how they see you.
Yes, it totally is good. And tell them, you know, you got this assignment from a coach or whatever it is, but it's a great thing to do, especially from your boss, because it can open up really honest, direct conversation and invite that honest conversation about how you're doing and what's going on. So that's great. That's perfect. Okay, so let's move to the next one. So number 2 is you need to identify your motivation for this and the appropriateness of it for the workplace, okay? So there are lots of reasons. And Caroline, can you hear me okay, by the way?
I can hear you fine. I hear a little background noise, but you fine.
Okay, all right, cool. It'll go away in just a second, and if I need to shoo them, I can. In terms of motivation, everyone, you want to think about, okay, what is the purpose of you doing, like self-disclosing and wanting to be more authentic? Could it be greater connection with a colleague that you just feel like you just either don't get along with or you just haven't connected well with, but it's important to do so? Could it be motivating your team if you're a team leader and you feel like, oh, I need to create that connection with them? It could be to, like if your team is maybe having a hard time or a colleague is, it could be to let them know you understand and give them that sense of empathy, and which would help motivate them to get past maybe a challenge they're encountering. It could be to advance your position in some way. So you want to think about, everyone, okay, first of all, kind of how am I doing? How do I feel about my authenticity at work right now? And where would be the areas that I want to improve it? If there is a gap for you, is it that you want to improve it with one particular person, with your team, with your boss? And what would be the motivation or purpose of doing so? Does that make sense, Caroline?
It does.
Okay, so the second thing that you want to think about, if you look on this slide here, is it appropriate self-disclosure for the workplace? And I'm sure we could come up with lots of different perspectives on what's appropriate, and have a whole nother, separate even webinar on that, because people probably have different views of it. I always tell people to err on the side of caution and kind of self-disclose, like slowly but surely, and kind of test the waters a little bit. Here are some of the things you need to consider when you're trying to figure out, is this appropriate, okay? So keep in mind that while some stories are appropriate in a personal setting, they aren't always appropriate in a business setting. Although you don't want to feel like you have to edit everything you say, think about if the topic you want to share about is appropriate in the workplace. Think before you speak here. For example, usually it's best to avoid conversations about politics, morality, and religion. There are some peers that we can talk about that with, and some situations for sure that we can. But for the most part, you want to kind of steer clear of those touchy topics just in case. And you need to ask yourself, is it really important to share those personal views or stories, especially if it doesn't have anything to do with the task at hand or the project? Is there something else you could share instead? There's plenty of other things to talk about, so just be smart about this, everybody. So first of all, you want to consider the timing. So one example here could be, if you're upset or in crisis, you may not want to self-disclose right then in case you say too much, because you're upset and you might just, say way too much. This has happened to me before. Or if a colleague is upset about a client issue, like in terms of timing, right away you might want to share something that happened to you, a recent similar experience that you had, in order to kind of comfort them right in that moment. Does that one make sense, Caroline, with the timing?
It does, absolutely, absolutely. I think thinking of this in a way that, you could be too emotional about a subject, and tempering that with the appropriate timing is absolutely critical.
Yeah, so it's really good to just take a step back for just a second. And what I find, everyone, is if your gut is telling you it may not be right, it probably isn't. So listen to that and err on the side of caution. Find something else that you can say instead to that person to comfort them or whatever it is. You need to consider the audience. We just had some examples about telling your boss that you're not happy. Sometimes that is okay to do, and a lot of times, or other times, it may not be, so you want to consider that. And think about in terms of your audience, are you talking to a boss, your peers, a client? Is this the appropriate person to be sharing this with? And then number 3, we obviously want to think about the environment. Not sharing something really personal in, a large meeting, some personal crisis, like maybe what's going on with your divorce or something like that. It's very different sharing something in a large meeting with a lot of people versus sharing something over lunch with a trusted colleague. So you want to think about the environment as well, and if it's appropriate for that time, okay? Any thoughts there, Caroline? Does that all make sense?
No, it all makes sense, absolutely. And I do think, as it's such a tricky thing. So I'm so glad we're having this discussion, because so much is tempered on the environment, like you were saying, with the boss that didn't really encourage the inner sharing, and you have to make a decision. Do I really like the function of this job so much that it doesn't allow me to perhaps, open up as much as I would, and making a judgment call on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do want to say something. I'm glad you said that, Caroline, because it made me think of something too. So for everyone, please keep in mind as well that some people don't want to self-disclose at work. Almost all. There is nothing wrong with that. There's no rule that says you have to do this. It's all about what works for you. And honestly, when I was talking about the boss beforehand that I had, who they would hang out after work and all of that, I didn't want to do that. When I was done with work, I liked them a lot, but I wanted to just go home and do other things. And so it was okay for me, for example, to self-disclose more maybe during work hours, but afterwards I didn't want to spend that much time with them. Nothing against them, it's just what was important and worked for me. So keep in mind, everyone, this goes back to the motivation. If you are happy with what people know about you at work, that's totally okay. Just think about this as a tool to use if you feel like, there are a couple of people that I would like to be more connected with. This is a possible tool you could use to do that. But do it in a way that works for you, and don't feel like you have to do this in any way, shape, or form. It's only about what's important for you being authentic at work, okay? Alrighty, so let's go to step number 3, and then I've got a tool that we're going to talk about for a few minutes after this as well about self-disclosure. So step number 3 is to communicate clearly when you decide you want to disclose something personal or talk about other things that are a little more personal at work. You need to communicate very clearly so that people understand where you're coming from. So be mindful of what you share and how you share it. So that's the content and delivery, this first bullet point here. Next, you want to think before you speak, especially in a potentially touchy situation or regarding a possibly difficult topic. One of the things you could do if you're about to go into a meeting with someone, let's say, and you do need to share something with them or talk about something that's difficult, you can write it down. You can write down what you want to say in advance or practice it on someone else first. Remember, everyone, how we say something is just as, and in some cases more important than what we have to say, the content of it. So you really want to be mindful of what you share about yourself and others. So think about this, a couple of questions. Do you tend to keep to yourself and therefore may not have developed bonds with coworkers that might be valuable to you? Or do you tend to overshare in the example we gave before? And if you're unsure, by the way, you can ask others and determine a plan to adjust. So if you've got a trusted colleague at work, you can say, hey, do I come across as a little colder? Do I need to maybe disclose more or warm up a little bit? Or am I saying too much? It's great to kind of check in with other people about how you're coming across, again, with that branding piece we talked about earlier. You can prepare in advance also, looking at the slide, by visualizing how you want maybe a difficult conversation to go. And then at the bottom here, considering how you're perceived. This is where you can ask other people about that. And I just wanted to add something else here about being a leader, and it goes back to the article from HBR earlier. You need to, as a leader, you need to consider how you're perceived and realize that being completely transparent, I think some of us feel like when we're leading teams, feel like we need to be really transparent because that's going to create connection with everybody on our team and it's going to work well. It's not always the way to go. Sometimes you could be perceived as uncertain if you do that. You might lose credibility and effectiveness as a leader if you disclose everything you think and feel, especially if you're unproven. Sometimes I find, like I said earlier, that it's better to kind of self-disclose slowly but surely when you're in your new job. You're going to kind of test the waters a little bit, see who you can trust, and do it over time. And especially in a leadership position, you do need to be careful of this because you want to come across, even though you might want them to like you, and feel connected to you and comfortable coming to talk with you, you're still the leader. And you need to be seen as confident and capable of leading that team. Does that make sense, Caroline?
It totally does. And I think, like so many things professionally and otherwise, you're so right on the visualizing and thinking about what you're going to say before you speak, just because of the perception. It's amazing to me as I work through employment situations and hiring situations with individuals, how, a response to an interviewing question, say, can sound so different one way than another way. And I think just being clear on how you're communicating is so important in that way.
Yeah. And again, if you're hesitant about it, everyone, think twice about it. And if you decide, I do need to say something about this because I feel strongly about it or someone has stepped on my toes, and if I don't speak up for myself, I won't be being true to myself, then just practice and write down how you want it to come across so that they can hear it and it's productive. I have a client who, and this is a good example. I was thinking about this when I was preparing for today. She is in a new role. It's been about 6 months for her. She's the director of a sales team for the Southeast and for a company here in Atlanta. And she has had a colleague undermine her in public in a meeting and also behind her back a little bit. And it was tough because she, when she first heard about it, she wanted to march right in there and talk to him about it because she needed to say, like, look, this is how I need to be as a leader. He was criticizing some of the ways that she was managing her team, and those were the ways that worked for her, being authentic to her, and as well as what she felt for her team. So she wanted to march right in right away, but, held off, waited overnight, thought about what she wanted to say and how to approach it, went into his office, and had a good, solid, calm conversation about it. She was direct and said, this is what I need, but she felt like, she would not be herself. She needed to stand up for herself in this way, and that her values were being stepped on. And it has gotten better. It's tough. She's in a new role as a leader, and it's tough for her, but it has improved, and that was something really important for her to speak up about. So it was a good example. All right. So let's talk about, this is our final couple of slides here, everyone, and this is a great, the Johari window is a great model or tool for self-disclosure, okay? So I'm going to give you a little bit of background on this because this is going to help you think about and kind of frame out what you might want to share if you do at work, okay? So the Johari window was developed by two psychologists, Joseph Luft and Harry Ingham, and it's a model for getting and giving feedback. It's a communication model, basically, and it focuses on self-disclosure, okay? The four-paned window divides personal awareness into four types: the open, the hidden, the blind spot, and the unknown, as you see here on the slide. And think about, everyone, the lines kind of dividing these four panes in the middle here, okay, are like window shades, and they can move as an interaction or as a relationship progresses. So if you look at the top of the slide, okay, what I know about me, and to the left there, the open, the text that's around the one on the top left, and what others know about me, what happens with us, and I'll show you this real quick and then we'll come back to this, is as a relationship grows, the panes, this open pane will become larger, okay? And that's where it's the beginning of a relationship here on the left and a closer one. When there's more open information out there known for both people, it's a closer relationship, okay? So I'm going to go back here just really quickly. So the open pane is things we know about ourselves and that others know. It's all out in the open, okay? So things like when you're meeting a new person, their name, your work style, what you do, that kind of thing. The hidden, right below it, is when we open the hidden window, we start to invite others in. Disclosure, as we talked about, can build trust and fulfillment. This is more private information. It could be like our insecurities, our fears, closest experiences. Or it could be even something about in terms of work, like, you know, if you're talking to a colleague, you don't have to say I'm fearful about it necessarily, but hey, I feel like I might need some help with this project because, you know, these are the areas that I might need more assistance in, okay? That's another way to kind of share hidden information without coming across as less confident. There's lots of ways to do this. The blind spot, the top right-hand corner, is things that we don't know about ourselves, but others do. And so if you look here at the top of this, the arrow going to the right where it says solicit feedback, this is what we were talking about earlier, where it's a great idea to get feedback from colleagues, your supervisor, et cetera, because you can learn more about what might be in that blind spot that you need to change or improve. And then the unknown is things that we don't know about ourselves and others don't know about me either. And if you look on the far left here, the giving feedback, self-disclosure increases as you go down and dive into that hidden box at the bottom, okay? So pretty basic and simple, but what you can think about is, okay, what are the things, like we said, that I would actually, that would be important for me to share with people, that would make me feel more real and authentic at work? And those are the things that you would want to consider kind of putting out there, you know, into the open and making this box a little bit bigger, okay? So as relationships grow, the open area should grow just naturally. It normally does, but we can also kind of, by self-disclosing, make that happen a little bit more. And we build trust and can learn to be more authentic at work and therefore more fulfilled by opening our personal shades to others so that we become more of an open window. And so here are 4 questions that I want you all to consider, okay? And actually, before I send the slides over, Caroline, I can add these into this slide here, everyone, so you've got them.
Perfect.
Yeah, don't feel like you have to frantically be writing them down. First of all, everyone, consider, do you need to practice more self-disclosure at work? Where are you at right now? Is there a gap? Is it a problem for you? Do you need to in the first place? Number 2 is, think about, are there times when you don't feel like yourself at work? There could be certain times when you're talking maybe to a certain person and you can't be yourself with them versus your other colleagues, for example. So you may be able to feel like yourself in certain areas or with certain people or on certain projects, working on certain tasks, but not in others. And you want to identify what those are so that you can practice more self-disclosure, for example, in those other areas, okay? And then ask yourself, could you benefit by telling others more about your thoughts, your feelings, your wants and beliefs, or your goals for your career, goals for a project, whatever it is that's appropriate. And then finally, come up with action steps, okay? And if you need a little bit of feedback and input on this, you can ask friends and family members. You could ask colleagues at work, hey, I feel like I need to work on this a little bit more. What would you suggest, okay? So those are the 4 things you can work through in terms of steps in order to move into and open up this square on the model. Does that all make sense, Caroline?
I like those questions. Mm-hmm.
Okay, all right, good. So I'll make sure, I just came up with those off the top, so I wanted to make sure I stick them in here. All right, so think about those, everyone, afterwards. And we're going to move to taking action now, and so we're getting close to the end of our time. So we'll talk about, and I want you all to get your pens ready and start to think about a possible action step that you can take towards being more authentic at work, okay? And then we'll open it up for questions as well. Just really quickly, there are low-cost products on our website for defining your dream job, career transition, all of that. We will give a door prize to one of the participants today as a thank you for attending. Caroline mentioned the Find Your Dream Job program. This is perfect if you feel like you need to figure out your career direction. The link is here. You'll get this afterwards. It's an awesome program. I'm thrilled about it. All right, so let's talk about taking action, everyone. I put one possible action step on here, but I want you all to feel free to, step out of the box, be creative. If there's a better one for you, that's okay too. So one of the action steps you can take, and by the way, everyone, feel free to share your action step in the chat box right now. Sure. Because sometimes that is so good for accountability and really putting it out there, and it'll give other people ideas. So feel free to go ahead and put in questions or action steps in there now as we start to close, everyone. And one of the action steps that you can take, if you feel like, oh, I need to know what my values are a little bit more, take that peak experience exercise that we talked about at the beginning, a time in your life when you felt lit up, excited, jazzed, and write about that. And ask yourself, are you living them fully at work? Okay? And this can be one of the first steps. If you want to go talk to your boss and gather feedback or coworkers, that's okay too. Pick anything that we've come up with today, but go ahead and write down one thing that you will do, everyone, and give yourself a timeline. This needs to be by the end of next week, by next Friday. Okay? And as you're thinking about that, we'll just go to the last slide here. This is my favorite quote I always like to leave everyone to think about, is just like anything else, disclosing things at work especially can be a risk. And this is why you stick your toe in the water, and you can do it slowly but surely, and then stop when you're at the place where you're done and that's enough. That's totally fine. So the greatest risk, though, is not doing this at all and not thinking about, okay, where do I need to be more authentic at work? Because I think it's really interesting when I talk with clients about their career direction and they tell us, oh, I'm not in the right fit. 9 times out of 10, they just need to make a slight course correction, and some people actually stay in the same job. But part of what's going on for them is they just don't feel as authentic enough at work as they could, and there are things that they can do about it. So take this quote with you to motivate you to take your action step in the next week, and remember that it's well worth it because you will reap rewards for it. Okay, so we'll open it up for questions. And Caroline, just let me know if you've got anything coming through, and we'll answer as many as we can before we go.
Great, everyone. Go ahead and put any chat or any questions you have in that chat window, and we will address those. Send those to Hallie or myself. Or, again, any of those values or accountability statements that you're going to honor in the next week.
It's funny, when I picked this image, I was like, I kind of want to do that. I don't really know what that is, but it looks really cool.
It does, it does. Oh, I've got a contribution. The action item is, or action states, how to decide if a colleague is trustworthy.
Ooh, that's a great question. Mm-hmm. So here's what I would say. I would notice and pay attention to their behavior, not just when they speak or around you, I would say, but also around other people too. So, for example, like they might be quiet with you and not talk about others, but if you notice them doing that with other people or oversharing or something like that, I would be cautious with it. So at the very beginning, I would err on the side of caution and feel things out at first. Don't share too much at the beginning so you can get a sense of who is trustworthy. But if you notice if someone tends to talk too much, they seem to be kind of impulsive and maybe talk about other people too much, even with you, I would be careful about that. Caroline, do you have anything to add? Does that help?
I think that's perfect. Just watch behaviors. You know, traditionally, if it's happening in regards to someone else, it more than likely is probably happening on multiple levels with an individual who chooses to share other people's business. So I would just say, yes, absolutely. Kind of watch those behaviors before you decide to disclose anything to a person.
Great. Oh, and I think we had one and it came to me, and of course, non-tech savvy person here. How do I read that chat? Let me open that. How do I let a colleague know that they are over-disclosing and making me feel uncomfortable? Great question. Thank you for asking. So I think this is one of those things where you want to prepare what you want to say in advance and like sit down with them, not just something in passing, and think about, okay, how can I say this to them in a non-threatening way, so to speak. So I would talk to them and give them specific examples and say, you know, can I tell you, I actually really like this tactic, everyone. Ask permission to tell them something difficult. And so the first thing you could say is, hey, can I chat with you for a few minutes? Great, set that up. Can I tell you something that might be a little bit hard to hear, but I feel it's really important. It's important for me. And hopefully they'll say yes. If they say no, then you may need to, you know, figure something else out and say, you know, this is actually really important. Or say, should we talk about it another time? Most people will say yes, so you should be fine there. But they should say yes. And that, though, sets the stage for it to be a little bit safer, and then they know what's coming. You're not hitting them kind of out of the blue. And then just explain to them how it comes across for you. Try not to make it about them too much, but say, when this happens, I get uncomfortable, and this is why. You know, I don't know what to say back, or I don't know how to help you, or whatever it is. So also try to focus on you and the impact on you, not necessarily making them wrong per se, but they should get the message of, oh, if it's having that impact on you, it's probably not a good thing to do. Caroline, does that make sense? Is there anything to add to that?
It does. That makes great sense.
Okay, great question.
I've got one more, Hallie, and this one is sort of where does it cross the line sort of question. So while you're sharing information and being authentic with coworkers, it might lead to closer or even romantic relationships, or a uncovering of conflicts of interest between two people. Kind of how do you temper that, I guess, is the question.
Well, I think go back to, first of all, like what we had talked about earlier, like, okay, what is the purpose of you sharing this information? Is it going to serve a purpose? Because honestly, if it's not, if you're just sort of venting about, you know, something bad that's happened to you, getting divorced, whatever, you know, an argument that you had with your spouse or something, and it's not really appropriate and it's not going to serve any purpose, then I would question doing it in the first place.
Right.
So that's one of the main things I would say is the self-disclosure has to serve some sort of purpose in some way beyond, you know, you just like sharing some private information. So if there is a conflict of interest possibility, though, I mean, if that's the job that you're in and there's a conflict of interest with, let's say, a coworker on a project, better to know that and deal with it than have it be sort of under the surface. So it's better to have that come out and have a productive discussion on it if possible. Bring in, you know, your boss if you need to, or whatever needs to happen. But I feel like it's better to have those conversations in a productive way than have them, you know, be shoved under the rug.
I completely agree, and I do think that, you know, obviously, as you said multiple times, when you're sticking your toe in the water to sort of see what's appropriate, you know, you're making decisions that are going to have professional ramifications in a lot of cases, and I think you have to protect yourself as a professional when considering what to share and not to share.
Yeah, and it is hard. I feel like sometimes, you know, and this is a similar situation, when we're reading articles giving advice about these kinds of things, there are some general rules, you know, which is what we've talked about today. But I find like it is hard sometimes to come up with the exact right, you know, words of wisdom and advice without knowing the certain situation. You know what I mean? Like so much is situational, everyone. So realize that too. And what I would say, if you're hesitant about something, bounce it off of a few friends, several friends and family members first. Because a lot of times, yeah, the general rules, they might not necessarily apply, and we really need to think about each situation individually.
Absolutely. You're totally right on that, Hallie. It's just there's so many situations out there in life that we can't always give a prescribed answer for every single one, as you all well know.
Yeah, it'd be great too, but yeah. So, and I, you know, again, like we said, just err on the side of caution and think about it. And I really do. I think bouncing it off of other people first is ideal.
Well, folks, it is just past the 45-minute mark for our presentation, and we thank you so much for participating on this Friday, Hallie. I thank you very much for being our leader this afternoon, and we'll look forward to future Career Conversations webinars. Would love for you all to tune in.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
Bye.